Welcome to Breakfast for Pancakes. I'm your host, PK Sullivan. This week, I am taking you down to New Orleans for one of the Cajun classics, Étouffée. Étouffée, at its most basic, is a stew that is flavored with the holy trinity of onion, bell pepper, and celery, then thickened with a dark roux. It is rich, warm, delicious, has a good spicy kick, but doesn't overpower you. Stick around, it's gonna be great. To make chicken étouffée, you'll need one whole chicken, salt, cayenne pepper, vegetable oil, butter, flour, onion, bell pepper, celery, garlic, beer, chicken stock, hot sauce, Worcestershire sauce, brown sugar, and parsley. Start by cutting up your chicken into the standard 8 pieces: drumsticks, thighs, breasts, and wings. Whenever I cut up a chicken this way, I like to start by removing the spine. That gets frozen and used later for stock. Just like with spatchcocking, use a pair of scissors to cut out the backbone and flip over the chicken. Now cut it in half between the breasts with a chef's knife. With the spine already removed, it's very easy to separate the leg from the breast. Simply run your knife through the skin between them. To remove the wing, bend it out and trim around the joint. Separating a thigh from a drumstick can be the simplest thing, but if you miss your mark, it won't work. There's a line of fat that runs around the knee. Line your knife up with that and press down. The knife should go through the cartilage of the joint cleanly. If you're off to either side, your knife will likely get stuck on bone. Repeat the process with the other half of the chicken. One of the reasons I like this recipe is because the original instructions said to season the chicken with salt and cayenne pepper. No amounts were listed for either. To season a cut of meat usually means to sprinkle it generously with salt. The inclusion of cayenne in the direction tells us exactly what we need to know. Cover the chicken generously with cayenne pepper. Typical guideline for salting is to use a teaspoon, 5 milliliters, of kosher salt per pound of meat. This is a 4-pound bird, so I'm doing a heaping tablespoon each of salt and cayenne. To mix them evenly, I pulse them together in a spice grinder. Yes, that will pulverize the salt a little bit, but it still works. Then I grab a shaker and use that to season the chicken as evenly as I can. This is pretty much the same process as seasoning barbecue. Set the chicken aside, clean up your station, and move on to the vegetables. The aromatic base of a lot of Cajun Creole cooking is the Holy Trinity, a mix of onion, green bell pepper, and celery. The mix should be roughly as much onion as the pepper and celery combined. Don't worry about being too precise with that unless you want to be. A medium onion, a medium bell pepper, and a large stalk of celery generally works out fine in most recipes. This should all get pretty finely diced, but not minced. To save time, I'm using my mandolin on the onion. The bell pepper and celery I do by hand and try to match the size of the onion. Mince your parsley. This isn't a precise operation at all. Just run your knife through it a bunch of times until you're happy with the mince. 5 cloves is a lot of garlic. Break out your microplane grater and make your life easier. Before we move to the stovetop, here's a quick tip. If a recipe all at once adds multiple liquid ingredients, or a large amount of liquid with dried herbs or spices, go ahead and premix all of that. It makes adding those to the pan a lot simpler. I'll be doing that in videos going forward rather than adding them individually. Today, that's the chicken stock, hot sauce, Worcestershire sauce, and the brown sugar since it will dissolve in the liquids. Fair warning, étouffée is a lengthy dish to cook. This is probably best for the weekends. It's not a quick weeknight supper. Start by heating a couple tablespoons of oil in a large Dutch oven over medium-high heat. Sear the chicken in batches. I like to start with the thighs and drumsticks because they will render out the most fat, and since they're small, they won't crowd the pan. Start skin side down and flip after 2 to 4 minutes once the skin easily releases. Keep a watch on the cayenne that falls off the chicken. You don't want it to burn. It burns most easily if that part of the pan has gone dry. The oil will want to pool around the chicken, so try to keep the chicken near patches of cayenne. After you've browned all the chicken on both sides, add the butter. Whisk and try to scrape up any fond stuck to the bottom, but be careful. I managed to fling boiling butter across the kitchen. It spattered my arm pretty badly. If I weren't wearing long sleeves, that would have been a world of hurt. When the foaming dies down, add your flour and get to whisking. We're making a roux, something you've seen a lot on this channel. But this is Cajun cooking, so it's going to be a dark roux. Even with the heat up relatively high, it takes a lot of time and whisking to make a roux of the appropriate color. If you remember from my Thanksgiving sandwich video, the darker the roux, the richer the flavor it provides, but the less thickening strength it has. We want a pretty dark roux, and I may have even stopped a bit too early. This took me about 6 minutes of whisking over medium-high heat. If you want to take yours further, lower the heat some to give yourself greater leeway when it comes to burning it. That does mean the roux will take longer to cook, but that's the nature of making a roux. Once you're satisfied with your roux, add the Trinity. Cook these until they're softened. Mine took about 5 minutes. Stir frequently. You're not worried about the vegetables burning, but the roux on the bottom could burn if it sits too long. Add the garlic and cook another 2 minutes until it's fragrant. Stir in the beer and whisk until smooth. The kind of beer you use is important. Don't use hoppy beer like an IPA. Hops get intensely bitter when reduced through boiling. This is actually a key part of brewing beer. The longer they boil, the more bitter they get. A malty lager like this Vienna from my favorite brewery, shout out to Dovetail, or a sweet stout like Left Hand Milk Stout are both great options. It's important to whisk this smooth because it forms the base for the texture of the gravy. It also gives the alcohol a chance to cook off. Add the chicken stock, hot sauce, Worcestershire, and brown sugar. Whisk until smooth and bring to a boil. Add the chicken, smothering the pieces in the liquid, and reduce to a bare simmer. This is actually where étouffée gets its name. Étouffée means smothered in French. This technique of raising meat fully submerged is called smothering. So really, chicken étouffée is just smothered chicken. Cover the pot and let it simmer for an hour and 15 minutes. When the timer is up, remove the chicken and set the gravy to boil. Strap on your barbecue gloves and shred the chicken. Remove and discard the skin, bones, and cartilage. Then pull the chicken apart into bite-sized pieces. Return the chicken to the boiling pot and reduce to a simmer. Let cook uncovered, stirring occasionally, for 30 minutes. Skim the fat as needed. There's plenty of fat in the rich gravy, but étouffée shouldn't be greasy. After 30 minutes, turn off the heat and stir in the parsley. Étouffée is traditionally served with white rice, like what I have here, but you could have it with some other starch, like a nice crusty bread or even mashed potatoes. After all, it's basically chicken and gravy, so mashed potatoes and gravy. What's not to love about étouffée? Tender chicken in a thick, spicy gravy? Sounds like heaven to me. There's a huge depth of flavor here, created by the dark roux and the interplay of the aromatics. The Trinity is a good base for the dish, while the garlic and brown sugar add a subtle sweetness. The chicken is tender, juicy, and succulent with the gravy clinging to it. For as much cayenne pepper as was used to season the chicken, it's not overly spicy. The heat builds slowly, only getting real spicy once you stop eating and the gravy no longer coats your tongue. The heat only lingers for a small time before fading away. Pair this with a pint of the beer you used in the recipe, and you're in for a world-class meal. Étouffée is a great Cajun dish. It's super simple to make. I hope you give it a shot. It takes a while to make, so this is probably a weekend, Sunday, all-day cooking affair. Get yourself a bottle of wine or have the rest of the 6-pack of that beer. You'll be fine. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe buttons down below so that the algorithm knows that I'm putting out good content. If you'd like to support me monetarily, I do have a Patreon. Link for that is in the show notes. I'll see you next time. Welcome to Pancake.